Let's just dive right into this explainer. We've literally all been there, right? You're staring at a blank page, or maybe you pause mid-sentence and you're just wondering, does this word actually sound natural? Today, we're going to look at how to stop guessing. We're talking about using actual data to sound exactly like a native speaker. We're going to explore how some really incredible computational tools can absolutely revolutionize how you choose your words, taking your communication from, well, just okay to incredibly precise.
So first up, Section 1, the word choice problem.
Okay, before we get to the solution, we really need to wrap our heads around the profound psychological impact of the words we choose. Because our brains, they don't just process dictionary definitions. We process context, emotion, nuance, the whole shebang. Just look at the framing effect. Take the aggressive word attacks and compare it to the much tamer word opposes. Using one over the other drastically changes how we judge the exact same event. Cognitive psychology calls this loaded or emotive language. A headline using attacks paints this vivid picture of hostility, right? But opposes, that just sounds like a standard, rational disagreement. The core message is exactly the same, but that tiny little shift in your word choice, it completely rewires how your reader understands the situation.
And this brings us right into what I call the dictionary trap. Think about it. If you look up the word profound in a basic dictionary, it'll probably list deep as a synonym. So logically, a non-native speaker might think, hey, if a pool of water is deep, I can totally call it profound water. But wait, a native speaker will say profound effect all day long, but they will absolutely never say profound water. There's no way. Why? Because words have these invisible natural pairings that a basic dictionary just can't capture for you.
So when we just rely on our gut intuition or a basic translation dictionary, we end up with these clunky, awkward phrasings. And guys, this has real-world consequences. When your reader has to burn extra mental energy just trying to decode what you're trying to say, their brain gets tired, their cognitive load goes way up, and when that happens, their ability to solve complex problems drops, and boom, you've lost their attention. They aren't focused on your brilliant idea anymore, they're just stuck trying to figure out your awkward word choice.
Which leads us to Section 2. What is a language corpus?
So how do we fix this? How do we take the guesswork completely out of the equation? Well, think of a language corpus as a massive, data-driven laboratory for words. It's basically a gigantic digital collection of texts, grabbed from print, video, audio, you name it. Instead of just asking one single person what feels right, a corpus lets you search through millions or even billions of words of authentic language to see what native speakers are actually doing out there in the real world. And to be clear, corpus linguistics isn't just sitting around reading a bunch of text. This is rigorous academic data. Researchers use some seriously advanced software tools to dig into the quantitative frequency of words, their grammatical structures, and their qualitative meaning in real contexts. They use corpora to literally figure out the most frequent words, how they co-occur or collocate with other words, and how those patterns completely shift depending on whether, say, you're writing an academic paper or just chatting with a friend. All right, moving on to Section 3, introducing COCA. This all builds up to what is frankly the ultimate resource for writers and language learners. We're talking about the gold standard here. Compiled by linguist Mark Davies, COCA, or the Corpus of Contemporary American English, is a staggering collection of over 1 billion words of American English texts. Yes, you heard that right, 1 billion with a B. Spanning 30 years from 1990 to 2019, it's the largest freely accessible corpus of its kind. And it's not just some dusty snapshot of the past, it's a massive searchable database that represents how American English is actually spoken and written right now in the modern era. But what makes COCA so incredibly reliable is how balanced it is. It pulls in about 20 to 25 million words every single year, equally distributed across 8 very diverse genres. We're talking transcripts from unscripted spoken conversations, fiction novels, newspapers, academic journals, and even blogs and TV movie subtitles. This balance is absolutely crucial. I mean, think about it. The way we talk hanging out at a coffee shop is drastically different from how we write for a peer-reviewed academic journal, right?
Because it's set up as a monitor corpus with consistent annual updates across those 30 years, researchers literally use it to track language changing in real time. For example, using COCA, linguists were able to track exactly how the word Google went from having near zero frequency in the early 90s to becoming a massively common verb just a decade later. It's empirical proof of how our vocabulary actually evolves.
Okay, Section 4, the power of collocations.
Let's dive into the core concept that's going to instantly elevate your communication. This is what takes you from sounding like a mechanical translator to a true native speaker.
Collocations. They are the secret sauce. They reveal the natural, idiomatic pairings of words. I like to think of collocations as words that are basically best friends. They just really love hanging out together. A corpus will show you, for example, that we say strong coffee, but we would never ever say powerful coffee, even though strong and powerful mean basically the same thing. By searching a target word, COCA looks a few words to the left and right to find its most statistically significant partners.
And what is super fascinating here is how these collocations completely change depending on the genre. If you search for the word run in COCA and you filter it by the news genre, you're going to see it frequently paired with words like business, like running a business. But if you filter that exact same word over in the fiction genre, it evokes a totally different narrative action, pairing up with words like away or a hand, as in run away or run a hand through their hair. Having that kind of genre awareness, that is exactly what separates a pretty good communicator from a masterful one.
You can also use it to compare near synonyms to make sure you're hitting the exact right tone or register. The data reveals that while a word like big is super versatile and ranks at the top for informal descriptions in spoken and fiction genres, the word large is heavily preferred in academic texts for precise quantitative references. So if you're writing a serious research paper and you throw in the word big, you might accidentally lower the whole academic tone of your work. COCA actually gives you the hard empirical data to make the right choice. Which brings us to Section 5, your lexical engineering toolkit.
So how can you actually start using this massive billion-word database for yourself? Let's look at the mechanics. COCA is hosted on the English Corpus website, and if you follow these really simple steps, you can unlock some incredible precision. COCA uses something called part-of-speech tagging, or POS tagging. Basically, this just tells the database if a word is acting as a noun, a verb, or an adjective. Let's say you want to see how the word utter is used, but you only care about it as an adjective, not a verb. You just click the POS button, select Adjective All, and boom, the system filters out all the verbs. This lets you isolate the exact grammatical form you need, helping you find the absolute perfect adjective for your noun without having to sift through a bunch of irrelevant data.
And beyond those simple searches, COCA's interface has a whole toolkit of advanced features. There's the concordance tool, also known as keyword in context. That lets you view your specific target word surrounded by hundreds of real-world sentences, which gives you an immediate intuitive feel for syntax. Then you've got the cluster and n-gram tools. These help you identify entire multi-word phrases, or lexical bundles, that native speakers use automatically as single chunks of thought. You can even use the trends tool to plot a word's frequency on a line graph across decades. You can literally see if a word is dying out or if it's trending in modern culture.
When you integrate all these tools, you are fundamentally changing how your audience interacts with your work. In fact, psycholinguists measure writing performance using a framework called CALF: syntactic complexity, accuracy, lexical complexity, and fluency. When you use COCA to find those natural collocations and dial in the perfect register, you're removing all that mental friction for your reader. Your actual ideas get to shine through brightly, which drastically improves your overall writing fluency.
So the big takeaway from this explainer is that you just don't have to guess anymore. You don't have to rely on some static dictionary that completely strips words of their real-world context. You now have the power to empirically engineer your language to perfectly match the rhythm of native speech. With 1 billion words perfectly categorized and sitting right at your fingertips, what will your next word be?